of Homeland Security. We welcome the Secretary here. The Chair now recognizes the gentleman from Texas to lead us in the pledge.
To the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Chair is now recognized for an opening statement. After 2.5 years of the Biden border crisis, here's what administration officials have told us. The Biden administration's policies have led to more national security threats. The Biden administration policies make it less likely that enforcement actions will be taken against criminal aliens. ICE officers have been reassigned from their duties, locating and arresting aliens, to simply processing illegal border crossers if they report to ICE, as they were ordered to when they were released at the border. ICE officers are attempting to arrest fewer aliens because of the Biden administration's enforcement priorities memo. According to the IG, we know that even aliens who illegally cross the border are on the terrorist watch list can be released into the United States, free to board an airplane and head to the U.S. city of their choice. We know that the record numbers of illegal aliens, terrorists, and fentanyl have crossed our southwest border during the 2.5 years of this administration. And we know that not only are communities on the southwest border overwhelmed, but so are cities 2,000 plus miles away from the border. With the current rate of removals and the current number of non-detained aliens who have been ordered removed from the United States at over 1.2 million, it would take 20 years for removal of those individuals. Criminal aliens who could have been removed under previous administrations are likely not subject to removal today under the Biden administration. And we know that Border Patrol does not specifically check the home country criminal history of aliens it encounters at the border. We know that the Biden administration's open border policies have led directly to the deaths of Noah Rodriguez and Kayla Hamilton, the violent assault of a teenage girl in Alabama, and the victimization of countless other American citizens. We know that this administration repeatedly violates the law under the guise of instituting safe, orderly, and humane policies. But nothing about the Biden administration's policy is safe, orderly, or humane. In fact, there have been more than 5.6 million illegal alien encounters across the southwest border since the start of the Biden administration. And that doesn't include over the 1.5 million gotaways. Millions of foreign nationals have indebted themselves to the smuggling cartels to get to this country. Millions of foreign nationals have subjected themselves to assault, robbery, or worse on the way to the border because they know that more likely than not, they will be allowed to stay in the United States once they get here. I know that today Secretary Mayorkas is going to try to paint a rosy picture of this disastrous mismanagement of our border, but the numbers don't lie. As of June, border encounters were down from record highs of 252,000 to 145,000. Only this administration and my Democrat colleagues would call it a success when monthly encounter numbers are near 150,000. In fact, from fiscal year 2014 to the beginning of the Biden administration, there were only 4 months with an apprehension number higher than 100,000. But under the Biden administration, there have now been 29 straight months, 29 months in a row with more than 100,000 illegal encounters on our borders. DHS was created in the wake of September 11th, 2001, to deal with after the terrorist attack. It was created to help ensure American safety. Admittedly, this is an enormous task, and it is one in which this secretary has completely failed. Instead of building off the previous administration's success, this administration has abandoned any semblance of border security and immigration enforcement. And Americans are paying the price, and they demand accountability. With that, I yield to the ranking member, the gentleman from New York, for an opening statement.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, we are once again far afield from the work this committee should be doing. The Department of Homeland Security was born in the wake of the September 11th attacks and exists to protect our nation from new and emerging threats. That work is serious business. And in years past, under the leadership of chairmen of both parties, when we welcomed the Secretary of Homeland Security into this hearing room, we took our responsibilities seriously. To be sure, some of the questions we posed in those past hearings were tough. Debate is often heated when we discuss important topics like immigration and the security of the nation. But our work on both sides of the aisle was grounded in a good faith effort to advance the mission of the department and to keep our country safe. How times have changed. A few weeks ago, desperate for votes on the debt ceiling deal, Speaker McCarthy promised the extreme MAGA wing of his party that they could pursue the impeachment of Secretary Mayorkas. As Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene put it, if she was going to vote for the debt ceiling bill, she wanted some, quote, dessert. As she so eloquently put it, everyone loves dessert, and that's impeachment. Someone needs to be impeached. Like many of her colleagues, she seemed not to care who was impeached, so long as they could engage in the political exercise of impeaching somebody in the Biden administration. She singled out Secretary Mayorkas as, quote, the lowest hanging fruit. And unfortunately, as we have already heard from the chairman, today's hearing will not be about legitimate congressional oversight or finding out the facts. Instead, the chairman and his colleagues in the majority will use today's hearing as a predicate for a completely baseless attempt to impeach Secretary Mayorkas. They will do so at the behest of the most extreme MAGA Republicans. It will be one more exercise in political theater for the right-wing outrage machine before the August break. And sadly, the outrage will be entirely evidence-free. Don't just take my word for it. In October 2022, before the Republicans took the majority and before any investigation had started, Chairman Jordan said that Secretary Mayorkas deserves impeachment. More recently, he said, quote, it is not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. That's right. Who needs high crimes and misdemeanors? Chairman Jordan thinks the DHS secretary should be impeached because he, quote, deserves it. To be clear, Republicans have not established any legitimate grounds to impeach Secretary Mayorkas. They have not uncovered evidence of wrongdoing or malfeasance of any kind. They have policy disagreements with the secretary, and so do we. But policy disagreements and personal grudges are not a basis for impeachment. Throughout this hearing, you will hear more of the same bogus claims that we've been hearing for the past 6 months. Some of it dangerous, some of it petty, none of it true. First, Republicans will say that as a result of a, quote, invasion of migrants at our southern border, we no longer have a country. Second, they will say that Secretary Mayorkas opened our borders deliberately and is willfully violating our immigration laws. Third, they will say...
So, we don't want to listen to Mayorkas, or whatever this guy, Nadler. You want to hear what's really going on while this guy's talking? What our government's really involved in? Check out this federal whistleblower that I'll have live on LFA TV today.
So under the Trump administration, I was allowed to speak up for the kid. But had it been under President Biden's administration, I more than likely would have gotten fired.
Let me just be clear on this. Under the Trump administration, if a child came to you as his escort and said, hey, I am being sexually molested by the person that is claiming to be my relative, my father, my aunt, my uncle, Trump would have shut that shit down in a matter of seconds. And now you're saying under Biden's administration, right before you left the agency and you ended your job, if you would have reported that a child was getting molested and the person that our government was potentially trying to, what do they call it, relocate them?
Reunify, but yeah.
So our government is literally trying to reunify a child with an adult that is molesting him. And if you would have reported that, you would have been fired immediately.
I would have been fired. I would have been fired. Which is why I said I can't do it anymore. I don't want to be part of this anymore, and I separated myself from the situation.
During the Trump administration, it was part of the process was in order for a child to leave a facility with an adult or go to an adult, there had to be a DNA test done, correct? To prove that that child was related to the person that it was going with. Is that correct?
Correct. But now that you mentioned that, I was thinking, so the reason why I couldn't sleep last night, was because you talk about these situations and you have so many things that come rushing to your mind, and you're like, I wish I would have mentioned this. I just remembered it just now. So under President Trump, I was once standing by the door and I was taking my sunflower seeds, I was drinking my coffee, and this was at a processing center. And I had a little child come up to me I want to say he was about 8 years old or 10 maybe, because he was about 3 feet tall, but he could talk. And he comes up to me and he says, he tells me in Spanish, Mister, el hombre que está conmigo no es mi papá. Y aparte de no ser mi papá, él me ha estado tochando. So what that means is, for those of people watching who don't know Spanish, is the little kid told me, the guy who's claiming to be my father is not my father, and he's touching me sexually. And when that happened, I told the kid, are you okay? You want me to report this now to the Border Patrol? Because at the processing center, the Border Patrol's in charge. So I can't get involved without signaling a Border Patrol agent. So I told the kid, do you want me to get a Border Patrol agent? And the kid was walking past me because the kid had just gotten lunch. They were handing out lunch. And the kid told me, I haven't eaten in a week. I'm so hungry. Can you wait for me to finish eating and then tell a Border Patrol agent? Because if you tell him now, I might not get to eat. So I let the kid finish eating. I signaled the Border Patrol agent. Border Patrol came, he left running, came back with his supervisor. They took the adult away. And I asked the BP agent, what's going to happen now? Well, what's going to happen now is we're going to run dental records on the adult to make sure what the kid's saying is true. And they separated them so fast. At the end of the day, I ended up finding out that it was true, that the kid was not related to, I don't know how they do that process. But at the end of the day, the BP agent told me, my supervisor thanks you. We can't share much, but what we can share, it's looking like the kid's not his father. And there was stuff like that in place under President Trump. And under this current administration, I can't go into too much detail about it, but something like that, I would not be allowed to do under the current administration. Under the current administration, it's, you're a contractor, know your role, don't speak out. You speak out, you're gonna get in trouble. You're more than likely gonna get fired. We'll call someone else and replace you tomorrow. Because, and they would say, let Border Patrol handle any situation that happens. It doesn't matter what the situation is, Border Patrol's in charge, you're not in charge. So under the Trump administration, I was allowed to speak up for the kid. But had it been under President Biden's administration, I more than likely would have gotten fired.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Dude, that I would not have been able to sleep if I would have forgot that. I would not have been able to either. So do you guys understand what we're about to watch here? That was Carlos, a federal whistleblower, who's telling us about during the Trump era, under Trump, if he would have went to if a child migrant would have came up to him and said, hey, listen, I am being molested by this guy that you guys are getting ready to send me with. This random person that's claiming to be my father is not my father, and he's sexually molesting me. Carlos was able to go right directly to a Border Patrol agent, and he said the Border Patrol agents would come running and immediately rip them apart and separate the kid from the adult. And then they'd go do DNA checks. They would run dental records to make sure that the kid was telling the truth, saying, hey, that's not my father. Instead of just being like mad that he's mad at his dad and whatever, and he wants to start a fight with his father and tries to make some stuff up. And then once they would prove that, they would arrest that guy and take him into custody for molesting a child. Under the Biden administration, if he were to even report it, he would be fired immediately and replaced with somebody else. And there's 25,000 of Carlos out there in the United States right now that are working with these NGOs and our government is funding these NGOs, and they are literally sex trafficking children around our country. And now we're about to sit here and listen to these Democrats try to convince you that the border is safe and secure and that these kids are being protected. No, there's 85,000 children that are missing, that our government cannot account for. And that's whistleblower testimony. These are facts that have been proven by whistleblowers with evidence to back it up. So if this video gets taken down off YouTube, good, you pieces of trash. This is the most disgusting and sick, perverted, corrupt government that you've ever seen. And they are facilitating child trafficking using NGOs to cover their tracks. And it's happening all around the United States. So let's listen to these Democrats try to convince you that this is about Trump or the MAGA extremists. No, dude, if you're trying to defend these child sex trafficking, human trafficking pieces of scum, you are the terrorist. I'm shaking right now.
The department will not be disheartened by what they hear today. I have confidence that they will not let these baseless attacks deter them from their commitment to the work that is so essential to the safety of our nation. And with that, I thank the chairman, and I yield back.
Gentleman yields back without objection. All of the opening statements will be included in the record. We will now introduce today's witness, the Honorable Alejandro Mayorkas. Mr. Mayorkas is Secretary of the Department of Homeland Security. He was sworn in on February 2nd, 2021. We welcome our witness and thank him for appearing here today. We will begin by swearing you in. Would you please rise and raise your right hand? Do you swear or affirm under penalty of perjury that the testimony you're about to give is the truth and to correct to the best of your knowledge, information, and beliefs, so help you God? Let the record reflect that the witness has answered in the affirmative. Mr. Mayorkas, you know how this goes. You've done this several times. You get approximately 5 minutes for an opening statement. We know we got your written statement last night. I read through it, but we'll look forward to your remarks, and then we'll go right into questioning.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, Ranking Member Nadler, distinguished members of this committee. I'm immensely proud to be here to discuss the work of the United States Department of Homeland Security. Every day, members of our extraordinary workforce, 260,000 selfless, dedicated, and talented public servants across the country and around the world make sure that travelers reach their destinations safely, protect our shores and harbors, keep fentanyl and other deadly drugs from entering our country, help families rebuild after the devastation of a natural disaster, protect our ability to safely and securely turn on our computers, faucets, and lights, and secure our border despite the broken and outdated immigration system in which we operate. These heroic men and women are meeting challenges that have grown more complex and dynamic throughout the 20 years since our department was established. As the threats have evolved, so too has our department, innovating and advancing as we secure our homeland and keep the American public safe. We are leading an unprecedented effort to interdict the flow of fentanyl into our communities, which has escalated for more than 5 years. We seized nearly 2 million pounds of narcotics last fiscal year. Operations Blue Lotus and Four Horsemen alone stopped nearly 10,000 pounds of fentanyl from the U.S., led to 284 arrests, and yielded invaluable insights into the transnational criminal organizations wreaking this death and destruction on our communities. When our department was created after the tragedy of 9/11, foreign terrorists were our primary terrorism-related focus. While that concern certainly persists, the most prominent terrorism-related threat we now confront is from lone offenders and small groups already present here and radicalized to violence based on ideologies of hate, anti-government sentiments, false narratives, and personal grievances. Thanks to support from Congress, we have developed grant programs and distributed more than $50 million in funds to help communities prevent acts of targeted violence and terrorism. Our approach to managing the borders securely and humanely, even within our fundamentally broken immigration system, is working. Unlawful entries between ports of entry along the southwest border have consistently decreased by more than half compared to the peak before the end of Title 42. Under President Biden's leadership, we have led the largest expansion of lawful, safe, and orderly pathways for people to seek humanitarian relief under our laws, at the same time imposing tougher consequences on those who instead resort to the ruthless smuggling organizations that prey on the most vulnerable. We secured the first increase in Border Patrol agent hiring in more than a decade, and our campaign to disrupt and dismantle human smuggling networks has resulted in the arrest of nearly 14,000 smugglers. We have taken bold and decisive action to counter the cybersecurity threat from nation states like the People's Republic of China, Russia, Iran, and North Korea, and from cyber criminals around the world who target our critical infrastructure and seek to hold schools, hospitals, police departments, and other institutions vital to our daily lives hostage for ransom. We have seen the recent devastation that increasingly severe and frequent extreme weather events have brought to Kentucky, Florida, Vermont, Oklahoma, New York, and many other states. Our department, through FEMA, is working with partners across the federal government to support communities impacted by unprecedented natural disasters and help them strengthen their long-term recovery and resilience through grant funds, technical assistance, and on-the-ground support. This and so much more. The DHS workforce does all of this with honor, integrity, and the resolve to safeguard our people, our homeland, and our values. They perform bravely despite public attacks on their character and service, despite unfair and inadequate pay, and despite, as frontline agents repeatedly tell me, threats made against them and their families. These public servants deserve better. Supporting the men and women of DHS has been my top priority since taking office. We have expanded departmental efforts to solicit and incorporate feedback from personnel across all components and all levels, work to ensure that every employee works in a high-quality facility, made new resources available across the department for employee mental health and well-being, and earlier this week, facilitated long overdue pay fairness for TSA personnel. Our department and this Congress need to work together as partners to address the threats and challenges America faces. We must fix our broken immigration system, fund the continuing protection of local communities, disrupt and dismantle transnational criminal organizations, and implement the latest technologies to advance our mission. Americans are safer today on the border, in the air, at sea, across the country, and around the world because of the Department of Homeland Security. Serving with the personnel of DHS is the greatest honor of my life. I look forward to continuing to work together on their behalf, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. The chair now yields to the gentleman from California, Mr. McClintock.
Mr. Secretary, what is the maximum number of illegal migrants you believe we should admit into this country?
Congressman, it is our responsibility to enforce the laws that Congress has passed, and that is indeed what we are doing. Individuals who do not have—
So is there a limit, yes or no?
Congressman, individuals who make a claim for relief under our laws and who
Well,
do not
you've
succeed—
already released more than 2.1 million illegal immigrants into this country since you took office. That's a population the size of the state of Nebraska. While the Border Patrol has been consumed by taking names and changing diapers at the border, 1.5 million known gotaways have illegally entered the country as well. That's an additional illegal population the size of the state of Hawaii. So once again, I would ask you, what is the limit, or is there one?
Congressman, last year we expelled or removed approximately 1.4 million people who did not have a legal basis to remain in the United States, the largest number in recent history.
Well, actually, you testified that 72,000 illegal migrants were removed in 2022. But in 2019, there were 267,000 removals. So removals are down under your administration by more than 75%. Meanwhile, in 2019, there were 458,000 border encounters, yet under your policies, we're now up to 2.3 million encounters. That's 5 times as many. So while encounters were up 5 times, removals are down by 75%. How do you account for this?
Congressman, a few points. Number one, our approach of expanding lawful pathways for people to reach the border and delivering consequences for those who arrive at our border irregularly is working. The number has dropped. You will also recall, Congressman, that last year, Title 42, the Public Health Authority, was in place, and under that authority, we could not remove individuals, but expel them.
Again, I'm short on time. You announced the CB1 app this year. It allows migrants to bypass the southern border and enter directly into the United States at ports of entry. This program began with up to 1,000 illegal migrants a day. It's been amped up to as many as 1,500 a day. That's more than 540,000. That's the population equivalent of adding a new state of Wyoming every single year. That's why the numbers are dropping. Instead of them coming in through the southern border, you're bringing them directly into ports of entry. So please don't dissemble. Now, I've got a very important concern for the people of my region. In January, a family of 6 people were executed in the rural town of Goshen. That's not far from my district. According to the Tulare County Sheriff, it was a cartel hit. The victims ranged from age 72 down to a 10-month-old who was shot in his mother's arms. 2 weeks ago, the FBI director warned us in this committee that the open border is a huge driver of cartel presence in the United States. Those were his words, huge driver. The Jalisco New Generation cartels now established hubs in Los Angeles, Denver, Phoenix, and Chicago. Millions have fled from Mexico to escape these conditions, and the cartels have followed them into the United States. So how long before we can expect the same kind of gun battles here as have become routine in Mexico?
Congressman, we are taking it to the transnational criminal organizations, the cartels that peddle in death and destruction to an unprecedented degree.
They're following the mass migration into this country. That's what the FBI director told us.
We have a number of lawful investigative actions and operations that are disrupting and dismantling those transnational criminal organizations.
Director Wray also testified that we have no idea how many terrorists are among the 1.5 million known gotaways that have entered under your policies, but that there's been a significant increase in terrorists apprehended at the border. When your administration abandoned Afghanistan, it released 5,000 terrorists that were being held at Bagram. 10 days later, one of them killed 13 U.S. Service members at Kabul airport. Wray said, we don't know where the other 5,000 are, but it's clear to me that we are in growing danger of a coordinated terrorist attack because of your policies. Have you given any thought to how you're going to explain yourself when that happens?
Congressman, the safety and security of the American people is our highest priority. That is what is the genesis of the creation of the Department of Homeland Security.
Obviously, it is not your highest priority. The numbers speak for themselves.
It most certainly is, Congressman.
I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. The chair recognizes the ranking member, Mr. Nadler.
Mr. Secretary, I want to address some of the outlandish claims my colleagues have made and put them to rest at the outset of this hearing. My Republican colleagues claim that the border is open. Is the border open, Mr. Secretary?
No, it is not.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. The border is not open, and to say so is not only false, but is really an insult to the brave men and women of the Border Patrol who work every day to keep us safe. Next, Mr. Secretary, my colleagues on the other side of the aisle have been extremely focused on an exchange you had with Mr. Wray the last time you appeared before this committee. They claim that you lied to the committee about whether we have operational control of the border. The Homeland Security Committee even wrote about it in phase 1 of their investigation into potential impeachment. It is my understanding that DHS and its components use different definitions of the term operational control. For example, the U.S. Border Patrol previously defined operational control as the ability to detect and interdict illegal activity. CBP, in their 2020 U.S. Border Patrol strategy, defined operational control as, quote, the ability to perceive and comprehend the operating environment, mobilize assets, infrastructure, and barriers to prevent criminal activity and respond to and resolve any illicit cross-border incursions, close quote. Furthermore, in a May 2023 transcribed interview, Chief Patrol Agent Aaron Heitke of the San Diego sector affirmed that, quote, Border Patrol has operated under different definitions of operational control than what is listed in the Secure Fence Act. So, can you describe what happened in that exchange last year?
Ranking Member Nadler, the Congressman did not allow me to complete my answer. The Secure Fence Act, specifically the statute, defines operational control as not having one individual cross the border illegally. Under that statutory definition, no administration has achieved operational control. Last year, we had approximately 1.7 million different individuals cross the border, the southwest border. And so under that definition, no administration, under the Secure Fence Act, no administration has achieved operational control, and we have provided data with respect to the number of encounters experienced at the southwest border every month to Congress.
Lastly, my Republican colleagues claim you are abusing your authority. However, Congress gave the executive branch wide latitude over immigration laws, including writing a provision in the Immigration and Nationality Act that allows for individuals to be paroled into the United States for urgent humanitarian or public benefit purposes. For more than 70 years, administrations of both parties have used parole for categories of people. Some of my colleagues have criticized these programs, as well as the ones recently implemented by the Biden administration for Haitians, Venezuelans, Cubans, Nicaraguans, alleging that parole is not being granted on a case-by-case basis. Is that particular criticism accurate, Mr. Secretary?
Congressman, I very well know in my 22 years of federal service, including 12 years as a federal prosecutor, that we are a nation of laws, and I take our obligation to follow the law scrupulously. I adhere to it strictly. Our parole authority is being used consistent with the law. It is a discretionary authority that the statute provides. We exercise it on a case-by-case basis, and our parole program has at least 3 significant benefits. Number 1, it has driven down the number of encounters at the southwest border. Number 2, it allows us to screen and vet individuals before they arrive at the southwest border. And 3, and very importantly, we are cutting out the smuggling organizations that wreak such tragedy and trauma on the lives of vulnerable individuals.
It appears to me that the administration is merely saying certain categories of people are eligible to be considered for parole. Is that correct?
Yes, we evaluate parole on a case-by-case basis.
But adjudicators still conduct a case-by-case determination to see if the grant of parole is appropriate. You just said that. And this is very much in line with the historical use of parole by administrations of both parties?
To my knowledge, yes, Congressman.
Thank you. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. The gentleman from California is recognized. Mr. Isa.
Mr. Secretary, we've known each other for a long time, including your time as a U.S. attorney. I'm going to ask you some tough questions, and they go back all the way to that time and before. Was the immigration system, well, you said it in your opening statement, it was broken. Was the immigration system broken when you were a U.S. attorney?
Congressman, it is broken. It has been broken for as long as I can remember.
And does broken include the fact that there's virtually no penalty for being a coyote or for entering this country illegally, that for all practical purposes it's a slap in the hand, and that U.S. attorneys historically have a difficult time justifying their time when in fact it's a revolving door for people who come into this country illegally and the coyotes who bring them? Isn't that one of the challenges you face?
Congressman, if you are referring to my time as a federal prosecutor.
No, I'm not referring to you personally. I'm referring to the broken immigration law. You said it was broken. I agree it was broken. I agree that it's broken today. But I just want to make sure that for the record, we get into what's broken. And I asked you a specific question. You might remember the dismissal of Carol Lamb when she said that it just wasn't worth prosecuting coyotes who weren't carrying weapons because they were going to be back out in weeks. So isn't one of the problems that there is no real penalty for human trafficking, and there certainly is virtually no penalty for coming here illegally?
There are penalties for immigration violations. Title 8 of the United States Code, Section 1324, deals with smuggling. Right,
and isn't it true that within if you come here illegally, you're going to essentially be sent back out of the country in a very short period of time, and if you traffic without weapons or drugs, you're going to be removed again. Let me go on to something else. Broken immigration system. Isn't one of the biggest parts of the broken immigration system the part that we've all been talking about, at least on this side of the dais, the fact that if you present yourself at the border and make a claim, one often that has been taught to you by your smugglers, taught to you by NGOs, if you make a claim, more than 9 out of 10 of those claims are false, you will get into the country and you will be here for an extended period of time. Isn't, in fact, a system that allows the vast majority of people making a claim to be lying, to be knowingly giving you a false story, one that after adjudication is proven to be false, isn't letting them in the country inherently part of our broken system?
Congressman, let me
that was a yes or no.
No, let me
give me a yes or no and then give me the rest.
Congressman, I respectfully disagree with your data, the statistic you cited. But one of the problems in our broken immigration system is the length of time it takes.
I understand the length of time. Isn't it true that most countries do not simply admit and release people waiting and tell them to come back when they adjudicate them? Aren't we an exception for the most part around the world?
Congressman, we are not alone in some of the infirmities of the immigration system that we have.
So today, as the Chief Security Officer for the United States, would you say that it is reasonable to release people for months or years rather than adjudicating them immediately at the border? Isn't it true that if we were doing our job in Congress and you were able to do your job, people would be adjudicated before they came into the United States? Those found to be credible would be admitted. Those not found to be credible would be discarded back to the countries they came from as appropriate.
Congressman, in the absence of congressional action, we have actually issued a regulation, the first of its kind, that has reduced the time between encounter at the border and the final adjudication of an asylum claim.
Okay, for the record, there has been, in fiscal year, let's say 20, you had 3 at the southwest border encounters with people on the terrorist watch list. So far this year, it's 140. Can you give us the whereabouts of those 140? Are they all incarcerated? Have they all been removed? Or is it a mixture of incarceration, removal, and release?
Congressman, let me say this. The safety and security of the American people is our highest
So
priority.
prove it to me. What is the status of those 140?
Individuals who present a national security or public safety threat are detained and are
By
priority for
definition,
removal.
Mr. Secretary, if you're on the terrorist watch list, you represent a threat. So 140 people on the terrorist watch list so far this year. For the record, would you please give us the status of each of those individuals so we know what you did with people who were on a terrorist watch list, who were apprehended, many got away, but were apprehended, where they are today so that Congress can know?
Congressman, I would be pleased to provide you with that information with respect to the individuals encountered at the southwest border.
Thank you. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back, but could the Secretary answer that question? What is the status of those 140?
Mr. Chairman, I
Mr. Chairman, what is the,
Point of order.
what authority or point of order?
Gentlelady, state a point of order.
Mr. Chairman, under what authority are you speaking right now? Whose time? Whose time is it? Are you being recognized for 5 minutes?
I was just asking what I thought would be a question
Mr.
every
Chairman,
single
it's
member
not-
of Congress would
it's-
want to know.
I don't-
I'll do it on my time or someone else's time.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Thank you.
He had asked the question, and there wasn't an answer to the status of the 140
Mr.
people
Chairman, that
apprehended
he
on
did, the
terrorist
witness
watch list.
provided an answer, and if you
I
want to
don't
use
think
your
he did,
5
but
minutes,
I'll do it on
think
my
that's
time.
great.
That's fine.
Thank
We
you.
recognize the gentlelady from California.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Secretary Mayorkas, for being here today and for your service to our country, first as a U.S. Attorney and now as Secretary of Homeland Security. You know, we all know that Congress has not acted in many, many years to update our immigration laws. In fact, it's been really, if you want to take a look at it, we're still operating under the outlines of the 1965 Act, which no wonder it doesn't work that well for the United States of America in 2023. So I'd like to ask first, do you agree that it would be better to have a legal framework wherein people could actually enter the United States with visas and the like, and instead of a mishmash of asylum claims and the like at the border?
Congresswoman, I do. I see other countries with systems that are more advanced than ours that actually can match the need for labor with the supply for labor. And in fact, Canada is one of those countries immediately to the north.
I would just note that the Canadian government has now opened up an official government effort to poach the most educated and the most talented postdocs and doctors in the technology field in Silicon Valley. 10,000 of the best and the brightest applied on the first day. So that is a loss to our country. I'd just like to note that we have a bill, it's a bipartisan bill called the Farm Workforce Modernization Act that would streamline the H-2A program and regularize the status as an agricultural worker visa for farm workers, half of whom are here without their papers. Do you think that would help regularize our situation at the border?
I do, Congresswoman. There are approximately, I believe, 10 million open jobs in need of workers. I hear from executives across this country about the need for labor. It is proven that lawful labor pathways cause a reduction in the number of irregular arrivals at our border.
I'd just like to touch again, the ranking member has mentioned the use of parole. It's one of the few tools that you have under the existing Immigration and Nationality Act. And I note that it's been used by presidents of both parties over many, many years. President Eisenhower oversaw parole of over 30,000 Hungarian refugees escaping communism. President Ford and President Carter oversaw the parole of hundreds of thousands of Vietnamese fleeing the communists. We have used parole for people fleeing communism in Cuba and fleeing communism in Nicaragua and now fleeing communism in Venezuela. Would you say that the use of parole today by category, but then case by case, is any different what prior administrations have done?
Congresswoman, we have used our parole authority consistent with the law and consistent with past practices of different administrations.
I'd just like to note that, the idea that we should cut off this way to rescue people who are trying to escape from communism today is completely wrong. And contrary to our history as a country, we have always welcomed those who are fleeing from communist oppression going back many decades, and I will strongly object if we turn our back on those refugees from communism today. That would be very wrong. I just want to talk briefly about the refugee process. As we know, in the last administration, basically the refugee program was destroyed. How are we doing in rebuilding the refugee processing as well as the processing centers in the U.S. and the nonprofits who are helping refugees come into the United States? Can you tell us how we're rebuilding the refugee process?
Congresswoman, we, under the President's leadership, have recommitted ourselves to the refugee process. It is a process that benefited my family in fleeing the communist takeover of Cuba. It is what drove me, quite frankly, to public service, the opportunities that this country provided for my parents, my sister, and me.
Back, Mr. Chairman, my time's expired.
Gentleman yields back. The gentleman from Colorado is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Secretary Mayorkas, last time you were here, I told you that my constituents consider you a traitor. Today, I'd like to explain why they believe this and ask you a few questions. I'd like to introduce first my constituent, Stephanie Granados. She lives in Loveland, Colorado, with her mother, Monica, and younger brother, Axel. She is 24 years old, bilingual in English and Spanish, a Christian woman who works as a restaurant server and is a loyal friend to those around her. Unfortunately, Mr. Secretary, that's only what I wish I could tell you about Stephanie. Stephanie's dead. A year ago, this young woman was poisoned. She never made it to age 24. Her mother's only glimpse of her now is in old photographs, and her brother misses his older sister. Stories like that are normal conversations in Colorado. Stories like this begin with fentanyl. But where does fentanyl begin? Many times it starts among chemical manufacturing firms in China. Companies like the recently indicted Hebei Sinaloa Trading Company from the Hebei province in China. It manufactures and advertises the drug's ingredients to buyers in Mexico, using common mail and import fraud tools like forged custom documents and falsely labeled packages. Firms ship the product upon purchase to drug dens in cities like Guadalajara. After preparation, these facilities finish the product and smuggle it by truck, by car, and by humans across our southern border. Chopped into counterfeit pills that are pressed to look exactly like legitimate pharmaceuticals or mixed with cocaine or other substances, Americans buy those drugs. And it's like a walking minefield. These illegal drugs are then used to kill American citizens. According to the CDC, over 150 people are dying every day because of synthetic opioids like fentanyl. CDC's National Center for Health Statistics reported 79,770 opioid-involved overdose fatalities in 2022, and over 80% of opioid deaths are attributed to fentanyl. In my home state of Colorado, fentanyl deaths remain near record levels. According to the Denver Post, more Coloradans have died of ingesting the drug in 2022 than overdosed on all drugs in 2016. And according to the Department of Justice's latest report on the subject, 64% of federal arrests involve non-citizens committing crimes, despite them comprising only 7% of the population. Secretary Mayorkas, going to ask a couple questions and answer them for you before I give you a chance to respond. But is China responsible? I'm sorry. Recently, you spoke at the Aspen Security Forum and stated that China bears responsibility for this. Is China responsible for keeping the southern border open to smugglers? Nope. Is China responsible for the Mexican cartel's emboldened attitude in the American drug trade? Nope. Is China responsible for the impunity of more illegal aliens committing crimes in America? Nope. Is China responsible for the record high 98 aliens on the terrorist watch list crossing the southwest border in 2022? Nope. Is China responsible for the 856 illegal aliens who died while crossing the southwest border last year? No. And that's more than 300 deaths, by the way, than 2021, and more than 3 times as many in 2020. Is China responsible for the 9,200 aliens with criminal convictions crossing the border illegally just this year to date? Nope. Is China responsible for the estimated 1.5 million illegal alien gotaways that crossed the border undetected under your watch? Nope. Is China responsible for the 1.2 million removable aliens who have been told by a judge that they must leave the U.S. but insist on staying? Secretary Mayorkas, it is your responsibility to secure our border against fentanyl trafficking. The fentanyl killing thousands of Americans every year is a direct result of your dereliction. When people die of fentanyl poisoning, it is your fault. What would you say to Stephanie Granados' family if they were here right now?
Congressman, we grieve the loss of any life as a result of the toxicity, the devastation of fentanyl. The challenge of fentanyl is not new. It has been escalating for more than 5 years. I believe there were more than 50,000 overdose deaths from fentanyl in 2020. This is a scourge that all of us have to work together to combat. And we in the Department of Homeland Security, with our federal partners, are taking it to the traffickers to an unprecedented degree through innovative operations targeting criminals. And I stand by my statement at Aspen that China does bear responsibility because many of the precursor chemicals and the pill press equipment that are used to manufacture fentanyl does originate from there. This is a complex problem. We are taking it to the criminals, and I look forward to working with you, Congressman, to address this challenge, which has been only building over many years in this country.
I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Yields back. Gentlelady from Texas recognized.
Good morning, Mr. Secretary. You have repeatedly been before us and indicated your humble beginnings and the passion and commitment in which you serve America and take very seriously your job here as Secretary of Homeland Security. On that basis, I have a number of quick questions that I'm going to ask for a sense of urgency and rapidness so that I can assure that all have been answered. First of all, I want to make clear that this is an oversight hearing, not an impeachment hearing. This is a hearing to address the questions of the work that has been done. And so to that end, just as a factual basis, there's been a lot of hollering about the entry on the border, operational control. And I'm asking for a brief question. We know that the federal government ended Title 42. Have crossings gone down?
Yes, they have. The approach that we have taken, Congresswoman, of expanding lawful pathways, safe, orderly, and lawful pathways for individuals, and at the same time delivering consequences to those who do not take advantage of those lawful pathways.
And part of that
has been working. The challenge, of course, remains.
My numbers suggest 70% that they've gone down, and it also suggests that the Biden administration has put in stricter requirements for asylum. Is that correct?
We did. We are delivering consequences for those who do not take advantage of the lawful pathways.
But you still believe in the humane infrastructure of America that started with the Statue of Liberty and realizing people flee persecution, political dynasties, if you will, that cause violence and a forcing of leaving. Is that part of our thinking here in the country?
Congresswoman, our laws, our refugee laws, our asylum laws are one of our proudest traditions as a country of refuge.
So would you say, having been asked this over and over again, that the United States, the President of the United States, the Secretary of Homeland Security, and all of the hardworking men and women at the border have operational control or have a form of presence, that they are aware of what's going on in the border and that they're working to secure the border every single day?
As we define that term, Congresswoman, we do.
CISA, has been called all things, maybe even not American. Is it an important element of securing elections as it did in the 2020 election, 2022?
The security of elections, our election system is a component of our country's critical infrastructure. To protect the safety, security, and integrity of the election process is a significant priority of this government. And the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency works very closely with election officials in state and local jurisdictions to ensure the safety and security of the election system.
I have two more questions, and I must quickly move forward. The ADL has indicated that there have been 3,697 anti-Semitic incidences, 36% increase from 2021. What is your department doing to protect the Jewish community? And within the new U.S. national strategy to counter anti-Semitism, what kind of commitments have you made? And I have another question, but I think this is extremely important.
Congresswoman, there has been a rise in anti-Semitism in this country, the rise in other ideologies of hate. Our responsibility as the Department of Homeland Security is when there is a connectivity between an ideology, whatever that ideology might be, and violence. It is the prevention of violence that really prompts our engagement with local communities around the country.
Thank you. I want to keep in touch on those issues. We all face communities who are certainly targets of that kind of violence. I want to suggest that immigration is a national and federal authorized responsibility. We see states like Texas and Florida that have spent billions in Texas, that have bused individuals to the vice president's home and to other places. Can you tell me how detrimental in questioning states getting involved in immigration issues and how confident you feel that you are protecting the American people and incidences like that, including incidences at the border, which I'll put in a record. Texas trooper alleges